Jake Thompson stood nervously at the altar, his heart pounding beneath his ceremonial suit. The grand hall of the Zorgonian embassy on Earth was filled with a mix of humans and aliens, all awaiting the arrival of his bride. As an ambassador for Earth, Jake had agreed to this arranged marriage to cement the alliance between their worlds. But he couldn't shake the knot in his stomach as he thought about the rumors of his soon-to-be wife's appearance. The massive doors at the end of the hall creaked open, and a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he saw her for the first time. Zylara, daughter of the Zorgonian High Chancellor, was indeed, as the whispers had described, utterly alien and, by human standards, grotesque. Her skin was a mottled green and purple, covered in pulsating pustules that oozed a glowing liquid. 3 asymmetrical eyes blinked independently atop a bulbous head and where a mouth should have been. Writhing tentacles twisted and curled. As she glided down the aisle, leaving a trail of bioluminescent slime, Jake fought to keep his composure. "For Earth," he muttered under his breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The ceremony was a blur of alien rituals and diplomatic niceties. Jake recited his vows mechanically, trying not to flinch as Zylara's tentacles caressed his face in what he assumed was a sign of affection. When it was finally over and they were pronounced husband and wife, Jake felt a mixture of relief and dread. As they turned to face the cheering crowd, Jake plastered on his most diplomatic smile. But as they began to walk back down the aisle, something extraordinary happened. Zylara's skin began to shimmer and shift, like a hologram losing cohesion. Jake blinked in disbelief as her alien features melted away, revealing a stunningly beautiful human woman beneath. The crowd fell silent, and Jake found himself truly speechless for the first time in his diplomatic career. Zylara turned to him, her now human eyes twinkling with mischief. "Surprised, husband?" she asked in perfect English, her voice melodious and clear. Jake could only nod, his mind reeling from the transformation he had just witnessed. As they exited the embassy and stepped into the sunlight, camera flashes erupting around them, Zylara leaned in close. "There's so much more to learn about us, Jake," she whispered. "This is just the beginning." And so began an adventure beyond anything Jake could have imagined, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about aliens, humanity, and the nature of beauty itself. The hover limo whisked Jake and Zylara away from the embassy, leaving behind a cacophony of shocked exclamations and frenzied media speculation. Inside the vehicle, Jake stared at his new wife, still struggling to process what he had witnessed. I don't understand," he finally managed to stutter. "How is this possible?" Zylara's smile was both enigmatic and compassionate. "Our species has mastered the art of biomolecular manipulation, Jake. What you saw in the embassy was a protective shell, designed to shield me from Earth's atmosphere until I could fully acclimate." Jake's diplomatic training kicked in, helping him regain his composure. "But why the deception? Surely revealing your true form from the beginning would have made things easier." Zylara's expression grew serious. "It was a test, Jake. Not just of you, but of your entire species. We needed to know if humans could look beyond physical appearance, if they could honor a treaty even when faced with something they found repulsive." Jake felt a mix of emotions. Admiration for the cleverness of the plan, a twinge of guilt for his own initial revulsion, and a growing curiosity about what other secrets his new wife and her people might be hiding. "And did we pass?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zylara reached out and took his hand, her touch sending an electric thrill through his body. "You did, Jake. You stood there, ready to sacrifice your own happiness for the good of your people. It's why I chose you." "Chose me?" Jake's eyebrows shot up. "I thought this was an arranged marriage." Zylara laughed, a sound like tinkling crystal. "Oh, it was arranged, but I had final say. I've been watching you for months, Jake. Your compassion, your dedication, your ability to see the best in others. These are the qualities we value most." As the hover limo wound its way through the crowded streets of New Washington, Jake's mind raced with questions. But before he could voice them, Zylara's expression turned grave. "But our challenges are far from over, my husband. There are those on both our worlds who do not wish to see this alliance succeed, and the true test of our union has only just begun. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of public appearances, press conferences, and diplomatic meetings. Jake and Zylara became the face of human-Zorgonian relations, their every move scrutinized by media outlets across the globe and beyond. But beneath the smiles and handshakes, Jake could sense an undercurrent of tension. He noticed the way some of his fellow diplomats would eye Zylara with suspicion, or how conversations would abruptly cease when they entered a room. One evening, as they prepared for yet another state dinner, Jake finally voiced his concerns. "Zylara, I can't shake the feeling that something's not right. People are talking, and not just about your transformation." His wife paused in the middle of adjusting her dress, a shimmering garment that seemed to change color with her every movement. "You're more perceptive than most give you credit for, Jake. You're right to be concerned." She crossed the room and activated a small device on her wrist. A faint hum filled the air, and the windows of their apartment darkened. "Privacy field," Zylara explained. "Now we can speak freely. Jake, there's a faction within both our governments that believes this alliance is a mistake. They fear that closer ties between our species will lead to the loss of what makes us unique." Jake frowned. "But that's ridiculous. Our differences are what make this partnership so valuable." "I agree," Zylara said, her eyes shining with approval. "But fear is a powerful motivator, and these dissidents are willing to go to extreme lengths to sabotage what we've built." "What kind of extreme lengths?" Jake asked, a chill running down his spine. Zylara's expression was grim. "Assassination attempts, fabricated scandals, even the possibility of inciting war between our peoples." Jake felt the weight of this revelation settle on his shoulders. "What can we do?" "We fight back," Zylara said, her voice filled with determination. "But we must be subtle. We'll use your diplomatic skills and my people's technology to uncover their plans and expose them. It won't be easy, and we'll have to be careful about who we trust." Jake nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I'm with you whatever it takes." Zylara smiled, reaching out to caress his cheek. "I knew I chose well in you, Jake Thompson. Now let's go charm some dignitaries while we plan our counterattack." As they left their apartment, Jake couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had signed up for an arranged marriage to secure peace between their worlds, but now he found himself embroiled in an interstellar conspiracy. And strangest of all, he realized he wouldn't have it any other way. As Jake and Zylara delved deeper into the conspiracy threatening their alliance, they found themselves venturing into the shadowy corners of both human and Zorgonian history. Their investigation led them to a dusty archive deep beneath the streets of New Washington, where ancient documents and artifacts from First Contact were stored. Zylara's eyes took on a distant, almost wistful look. Zorgon Prime is intense. The gravity is stronger than Earth's, the air thicker and more humid. The sky is a perpetual swirl of purples and greens due to our binary star system. And the cities, they're alive, Jake. Literally. Our buildings grow and adapt to our needs. Jake tried to imagine it, but he knew his human mind could barely scratch the surface of what awaited him. As the ship shuddered and groaned around them, he felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Days later, as they approached Zorgon Prime, Jake got his first view of Zylara's homeworld. It was a swirling orb of vibrant colors, nothing like the blue and green of Earth. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jake felt the increased gravity tugging at him, making each movement an effort. But there was no time to acclimate. As soon as they disembarked, alarms blared across the spaceport. "They know we're here," Zylara hissed, her form shimmering as she adapted to her native environment. "Quick, this way." They raced through the living city, its structures pulsing and shifting around them. Jake marveled at the alien beauty even as he struggled to breathe in the thick air. They ducked into a hidden alcove, and Zylara pressed her hand to the wall. It rippled and opened, revealing a secret passage. "The ancient temples," she explained as they hurried through the organic tunnel. "They hold the keys to the prophecy." As they emerged into a vast, cathedral-like space, Jake gasped in awe. The walls were covered in shifting, glowing symbols that seemed to react to their presence. In the center of the room stood a crystalline structure that pulsed with an inner light. "The Nexus," Zylara breathed. "The source of our people's collective knowledge and power." But before they could approach it, a booming voice echoed through the chamber. "So the prodigal daughter returns." They turned to see a group of Zorgonians entering the temple, led by an imposing figure Jake recognized from diplomatic briefings, the High Chancellor, Zylara's father. "Father," Zylara said, her voice a mix of defiance and respect, "we know about the prophecy, about the true history between our worlds." The High Chancellor's expression was unreadable. "Then you know why we can't allow this union to continue. The risk is too great." Jake stepped forward, drawing on every ounce of his diplomatic training. "With all due respect, Chancellor, I think you're misinterpreting the prophecy. It's not about the destruction of either world. It's about transformation." To demonstrate, Jake reached out to Zylara. As their hands touched, the now familiar surge of energy flowed between them. The symbols on the walls began to pulse in rhythm with their combined heartbeats. The High Chancellor's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible." Zylara spoke, her voice resonating with power. "The prophecy speaks of balance, Father. Not Zorgonian, not human, but something new. Something that can bridge the gap between our worlds and usher in an era of true cooperation." As if in response to her words, the Nexus crystal began to glow brighter. Tendrils of energy reached out, enveloping Jake and Zylara. Jake felt his consciousness expanding, melding with Zylara's in a way that transcended physical form. In that moment, he understood the true potential of their union. Not just a diplomatic arrangement, but a blueprint for a new kind of existence. Images flashed through their shared mind. Future cities where humans and Zorgonians lived in harmony. Spacecraft piloted by hybrid beings exploring the furthest reaches of the galaxy. Scientific breakthroughs born from the merging of two radically different approaches to the universe. As the vision faded and they returned to their individual forms, Jake and Zylara found themselves facing a room full of awestruck Zorgonians. The High Chancellor was the first to break the silence. We had no idea. All this time we thought we were preventing a catastrophe. But you two, you're the key to our future." In the days that followed, Jake and Zylara worked tirelessly to share their vision with both worlds. There was resistance, of course. Change is never easy, especially on a cosmic scale. But as more people witnessed the potential of their union, a wave of hope began to spread. Academies were established to explore and develop the new abilities that arose from human-Zorgonian cooperation. Diplomatic relations flourished as both species gained a deeper understanding of each other. And at the heart of it all were Jake and Zylara, once an unlikely pair brought together by political necessity, now the symbol of a bright and boundless future. Years later, as they stood on the balcony of their home, overlooking a city that seamlessly blended human and Zorgonian architecture, Jake turned to his wife. "You know," he said with a smile, "when I first saw you in your ugly form, I never imagined we'd end up here." Zylara laughed, her form shimmering between human and Zorgonian as it often did now. "And I never imagined a human could see beyond appearances to the beauty within." As they gazed out at the world they had helped shape, Jake reflected on their journey. From an awkward diplomatic marriage to saviors of two worlds, it had been an incredible ride. And as he felt the familiar tingle of their shared energy flowing between them, he knew their greatest adventures were still to come. The ugly alien daughter and the reluctant human diplomat had transcended their origins, their union a testament to the power of looking beyond the surface to find the extraordinary potential that lies within us all. "Look at this," Jake said, carefully unrolling a fragile piece of parchment. "It's a personal account from one of the first human ambassadors to visit Zorgon Prime, but something's odd about it." Zylara leaned in, her eyes scanning the faded text. "The language is strange, almost like it's in code." Jake nodded. "Exactly. And look at the date. It's from nearly a century before official first contact was established." They shared a look of excitement and trepidation. If this document was genuine, it could rewrite the history of human-Zorgonian relations. But it could also provide ammunition for those seeking to undermine their alliance. As they continued to pore over the archives, a pattern began to emerge. Hidden messages, redacted files, and inconsistencies in official records all pointed to a long-standing secret relationship between a select few from both species. It's like there was a shadow diplomacy happening right under everyone's noses, Jake mused. Xylara's brow furrowed in concentration. But why keep it hidden for so long? And how does this connect to the threats we're facing now? Before Jake could respond, the lights in the archive flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The heavy thud of boots on metal flooring echoed through the chamber. "We've got company," Jake whispered, his heart racing. Xylara's hand found his in the darkness, and he felt a surge of warmth as her skin began to glow faintly, providing just enough light to see by. "This way," she hissed, pulling him towards a hidden alcove behind a row of filing cabinets. They huddled together in the tight space, barely daring to breathe as flashlight beams swept through the archive. Jake could make out snippets of conversation, something about purging the evidence and maintaining the narrative. When the intruders had finally gone, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake, Jake and Xylara emerged from their hiding spot. They were thorough, Jake said, surveying the scattered documents and smashed artifacts. But they missed something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ancient parchment he had been examining earlier. "I managed to grab this before we hid. It might be our only lead now." Xylara's eyes widened. "Jake, you brilliant man, but we can't stay here. It's not safe." As they made their way out of the archive, careful to avoid security cameras and patrolling guards, Jake's mind was racing. The conspiracy they were unraveling was bigger than they had imagined, with roots stretching back through decades of secret history. "Where do we go from here?" he asked as they emerged onto the moonlit streets of New Washington. Xylara's expression was one of fierce determination. "We follow the trail, wherever it leads. But first, we need to find someone we can trust. Someone who can help us decode that message." As they melted into the shadows of the city, Jake felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. He had entered into this marriage for the sake of diplomacy, but now he found himself on a mission that could reshape the future of both their worlds. And through it all, he realized, his connection with Xylara was growing stronger with each passing moment. The trail led Jake and Xylara to a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of New Seattle. The acid rain that plagued this part of the city had eaten away at the building's facade, leaving it looking more like an ancient ruin than a place people called home. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, eyeing the crumbling structure warily. Xylara nodded, her eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. "Dr. Ilara Chen is the foremost expert in xenolinguistics and cryptography. If anyone can decode that message, it's her." As they approached the apartment, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he instinctively moved closer to Xylara. They found Dr. Chen's door and knocked. After a tense moment of silence, the door creaked open, revealing a small elderly woman with bright, inquisitive eyes. "I was wondering when you two would show up," Dr. Chen said, ushering them inside. "The winds of change are blowing, and they've carried whispers of your names." Jake and Xylara exchanged a puzzled glance as they followed Dr. Chen into her apartment. The interior was a stark contrast to the dilapidated exterior. Every surface was covered with holographic displays, ancient tomes, and strange, pulsating alien artifacts. "Dr. Chen, we need your help," Jake began, reaching for the parchment. But before he could explain further, Dr. Chen held up a hand to silence him. She closed her eyes, as if listening to something only she could hear. "The walls have ears, my dears," she said softly. "And not all of them are friendly. Follow me." She led them to what appeared to be an ordinary closet. But when Dr. Chen pressed her palm against the back wall, it shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden room filled with even more advanced technology. "A Zorgonian privacy field," Xylara gasped. "But how did you—" Dr. Chen's eyes twinkled. "I've picked up a few tricks over the years. Now, show me what you've brought." Jake carefully unrolled the parchment, explaining how they had found it and the attack on the archive. Dr. Chen listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. "This is graver than I feared," she murmured, gently taking the document. What we have here is no ordinary coded message. It's written in the most ancient form of Zorgonian script, intertwined with a variation of Voynich manuscript ciphers. She turned to her computer, fingers flying over the holographic keyboard. It will take time to fully decode, but I can give you the gist. This document speaks of a prophecy, one that foretells a union between our species that will either bring about a golden age of prosperity or utter destruction. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. And which one are we headed for? Dr. Chen's gaze was piercing as she looked at him and Zalara. That, my dear ambassadors, depends entirely on you. The choices you make in the coming days will shape the destiny of both our worlds. Suddenly, an alarm blared from one of Dr. Chen's monitors. We've got company, she said, her voice tense. Looks like your pursuers have found us. Zylara's skin began to shimmer, her human appearance flickering as she prepared for a possible confrontation. We need to get out of here. Dr. Chen, come with us. You're not safe here anymore. The old woman shook her head. No. My role is to stay and guard the knowledge. But you two must go. Take this. She pressed a small, pulsating orb into Jake's hand. It contains everything I've decoded so far and the keys to unraveling the rest. Guard it with your life. As the sound of boots on stairs grew louder, Dr. Chen ushered them towards a hidden exit. Remember, she called after them, the prophecy speaks of balance, neither fully human nor fully Zorgonian, but something new, something transcendent. As Jake and Zylara fled into the night, the weight of Dr. Chen's words settled over them. They were no longer just fighting a conspiracy. They were racing to fulfill an ancient prophecy that could determine the fate of two civilizations. And as they ran, hand in hand, Jake realized that his arranged marriage had become something far more profound. With each step, each shared danger, he and Zylara were forging a bond that might just be the key to saving both their worlds. The next few days were a blur of constant movement and paranoia. Jake and Zylara crisscrossed the globe, always one step ahead of their pursuers, following leads from the data Dr. Chen had given them. They slept in seedy motels, abandoned warehouses, and once, memorably, in the hull of a decommissioned spacecraft. It was during one of these rare moments of respite that Jake finally had time to really process everything that had happened. He sat on the edge of a rusty bed, the pulsating orb from Dr. Chen casting an eerie glow over the dingy room. Zylara? He said softly, watching as his wife tinkered with some Zorgonian tech she had smuggled to Earth. What do you think, Doctor? Chen meant about us being something new? Something transcendent? Zylara paused in her work, her brow furrowing in thought. She set down her tools and moved to sit beside Jake on the bed. I've been pondering that myself, she admitted. In Zorgonian culture, we have legends of beings called the synergists, individuals who could bridge the gap between different species, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. Jake nodded slowly, his mind racing. And you think that's what we're supposed to be? But how? I mean, we're from completely different worlds, literally. Zylara took his hand, her touch sending a familiar tingle through his body. Perhaps that's exactly the point, Jake. Look at us. A human and a Zorgonian, married under false pretenses, now on the run and trying to save both our worlds. We're already breaking all the rules. As if to emphasize her point, Zylara's skin began to shimmer, shifting between her human appearance and her natural Zorgonian form. Jake found himself mesmerized by the transformation, no longer feeling any revulsion at her alien features. You're beautiful in both forms, he said softly, surprising himself with the sincerity of the words. Zylara's three eyes blinked in surprise, then crinkled in what Jake had come to recognize as a smile. And you, my dear husband, are learning to see with more than just your eyes. Perhaps this is the beginning of our transcendence. Their moment of connection was abruptly shattered by the sound of hovercrafts outside. Jake leapt to his feet, adrenaline surging through his veins. They've found us, he hissed, already moving to gather their meager belongings. Zylara was right behind him, her movements fluid and precise. The roof, she said. I have a plan, but you'll have to trust me completely. Jake didn't hesitate. Always, he said, and meant it. They raced up the rickety stairs to the roof, the sound of their pursuers growing louder with each passing second. When they burst out into the open air, Jake's heart sank. They were surrounded on all sides by towering skyscrapers with no visible escape route. Xylara, however, seemed unfazed. She pulled Jake close, her body beginning to glow with an otherworldly light. "Remember what Dr. Chen said about balance," she whispered. "Not fully human, not fully Zorgonian. We need to find the middle ground." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Xylara pressed her forehead to his. A jolt of energy passed between them, and suddenly Jake felt different, lighter, more connected to everything around him. "Open your eyes," Xylara said softly. Jake did, and gasped. The world around him had changed. He could see energy flows, invisible currents in the air. And more incredibly, he could feel them. "Focus," Xylara instructed, her voice echoing strangely in his mind. "Feel the currents. We can ride them." As the door to the roof burst open and armed figures poured out, Jake let his instincts take over. Hand in hand with Xylara, he leapt off the building, but instead of falling, they soared, carried by invisible waves of energy that Jake could now perceive and manipulate. They glided between buildings, zigging and zagging to avoid pursuit. Jake heard shouts of confusion and frustration behind them, but he didn't dare look back. He was too exhilarated by this newfound ability, this melding of human intuition and Zorgonian biomanipulation. When they finally touched down in a secluded park on the outskirts of the city, Jake was breathless with wonder. "That was incredible," he panted. "How did we do that?" Xylara's eyes shone with excitement and a hint of pride. "We tapped into the fundamental energies that connect all living things. It's a Zorgonian ability, but one that usually takes years to master. Somehow, together, we unlocked it instantly." Jake shook his head in amazement. "So this is what Dr. Chen meant. We're not just bringing our species together politically. We're literally combining our abilities, creating something new." Xylara nodded solemnly. "And I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface of what we can do together." As the gravity of their situation settled back over them, Jake's expression grew serious. "So what's our next move?" "We can't keep running forever." Xylara's gaze turned distant, as if she were looking at something far beyond the confines of the park. "No, we can't. It's time we took the fight to them. But first, we need to understand the full scope of this prophecy. And for that, we need to go to the one place we've been avoiding." Jake felt a mix of anticipation and dread as he realized what she meant. "Zorgon Prime." Xylara nodded, her expression a mirror of his own conflicted feelings. "My homeworld, where this all began and where it must end. Are you ready for that, Jake? Once we go there, there's no turning back." Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. But as he looked at Xylara, he also felt a surge of strength and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "I'm ready," he said firmly. "Let's go save our worlds." As they set off to find a way off-planet, Jake couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come. From a reluctant diplomatic marriage to an intergalactic adventure with the fate of two species hanging in the balance. And through it all, he realized he had found something he never expected. A partnership that transcended species, a love that defied explanation. Whatever the prophecy had in store for them, Jake knew one thing for certain. His union with Xylara was no longer just a political arrangement. It was the key to unlocking a future beyond anything either of their worlds had ever imagined. The trip to Zorgon Prime was fraught with danger. Jake and Xylara had to use every ounce of their newfound abilities and diplomatic connections to secure passage on a smuggler's ship. As they hurtled through the star-studded void of space, Jake found himself both terrified and exhilarated by what lay ahead. "Tell me about your home," Jake said softly as they huddled together in the cramped cargo hold of the ship. "What should I expect?" Xylara's eyes took on a distant, almost wistful look. "Zorgon Prime is intense. The gravity is stronger than Earth's, the air thicker and more humid.